Good day, everyone. I am Rhea Teresa B. Bulala, and our topic for today is all about the establishment of Roman Empire. In the previous topic, we have tackled about how the Roman Empire labeled as one of the greatest civilization. They united the ancient Mediterranean and the Western Europe. As we all know, Rome was self-effacing settlement located in central Italy. They are surrounded by authoritative enemies that somehow leads them to develop tactics to stretch out their military values, bravery, discipline, and fortitude. Rome's victory over Carthage resulted to enormous expenditures of wealth and manpower. The treaty that they had made immediately vanished when the Senate called for another war, but this time in Greece. But the intervention in that region remained unclear. When the power of Macedon had waned in the 3rd century BC, Greek politics was dominated by two loose and turbulent federations, namely the aggressive Aetolian League in central Greece and the Achaean League in the south, that suited the purposes of the three neighboring states: the Rhodes, a commercial center with a fine navy; the Pergamum, a growing kingdom in western Asia Minor; and the Ptolemaic Egypt, who attempted to undermine both Macedon and the Seleucid kingdom in Syria. By 202 BC, the balance of power among the three Hellenistic monarchies, namely the Seleucids of Syria and Persia, the Ptolemies of Egypt, and the Antigonids of Greece and Macedonia, had been upset by the succession of child to the throne of the Ptolemies. Meanwhile, Philip V of Macedon hoped to control Greece around 238 to 179 BC. He made a common cause with the Seleucid monarch headed by Antiochus III, the sixth ruler of the Seleucid Empire, and also who was not interested in Europe, seeking only to occupy Palestine and some part of Asia Minor under Egyptian rule. Though the situation was said to be unstable, it did not appear to endanger Rome. The Rome sent a naval expedition on the eve of the Second Punic War. The Battle of Punic War was the Battle of the Carthage and Rome between 218 to 201 BCE, headed by Hannibal from Carthaginians and Scipio Africanus from the Romans. On this battle, Roman troops led by Scipio Africanus defeat Hannibal after his stunning invasion of Italy. They sent a naval expedition in order to defeat piracy along the eastern shore of Adriatic. Philip V was threatened by the presence of the navies after the Battle of Cannae, also a major battle of the Second Punic War, a decisive victory of the Carthaginians' army over Roman forces. However, many prominent Romans were fascinated by the culture of the Greeks. Rome was still in many ways a crude place. It had yet developed a literature of its own, and wealthy families relied upon Greek tutors to educate their son, and one of these was Scipio Africanus, a Roman general and statesman. He was notable as one of the main architects of Rome's victory against Carthage in the Second Punic War. Even Cato, Marcus Porcius Cato, was also a Roman soldier. He was known for his conservatism and opposition to Hellenization. Cato is also a hard-bitter traditionalist who spoke Greek and who was also familiar with Greek literature. At the Battle of Cynocephalae, an encounter battle fought in Thessaly in 197 BC between the Roman army led by Titus Quinctius Flaminus and the Antigonid dynasty of Macedon led by Philip V. This time, sea power gave Rome an advantage. They outmaneuvered the Macedonian phalanx, which is an infantry formation by the classical Greeks. Philip V retreated within his border, and it was a decisive victory for Romans. Subsequently, the Romans turned their attention to Antiochus, which is the sixth ruler of the Seleucid Empire, who achieved his goals in Palestine and Asia Minor. He took advantage of Macedonian weakness to cross the Hellespont and annex Thrace. By this time, the Senate was less eager and had failed to remove Antiochus from Europe. He was defeated in 191 BC at the historic site of the Thermopylae by a Roman force under Cato. In 190 to 189 BC, a second Roman army marched into Asia to defeat him again near Sardis. Then Antiochus abandoned all thought of Europe and surrendered most of his land in Asia Minor to Rome's ally, the Pergamum. The Roman kept nothing, but in 133 BC, the childless Attalos of Pergamon bequeathed the entire kingdom to Rome in his will. The defeat of the two Hellenistic kingdoms proved that Rome was the dominant power in the Mediterranean world. However, two main factions emerged: the Grecophile Scipius, who hoped to achieve a settlement based on friendship with the Greek leagues. This view has been preserved by Polybius. Meanwhile, the opposing faction was headed by Cato, who was immune to any form of sentimentality and wanted an end to adventures in the East. And this view of Cato has prevailed. Perseus, the son of Philip V, allowed Pergamon to maneuver into a disastrous war with Rome. But the Romans defeat him at the Battle of Pydna that took place in 168 BC between Rome and Macedon during the Third Macedonian War. This battle saw the further ascendancy of Rome in the Hellenistic world and the end of the Antigonid line of kings whose power traced back to Alexander the Great. And the Macedon was divided into four parts: the Vandar Macedonia, Central Macedonia, Eastern Macedonia and Thrace, and Western Macedonia. They destroyed approximately 70 towns in Epirus and sold 150,000 of its inhabitants into slavery. Meanwhile, a revolt had broken out in Macedonia under the leadership of a man who claimed to be Perseus' son, Andriscus. The Romans easily defeated it and annexed Macedon as a Roman province, but the Achaeans was angry over the hostage issue and decided to challenge the Roman authority and several army forces. The response was devastating, in which Achaean League suffered its last defeat on battlefield in 146 BC. The Romans destroyed the city of Corinth in reprisal. They killed men, enslaved women and children, and carried away their city's priceless art treasure. Then, they abolished the leagues and replaced democratic governments in several cities with oligarchies responsive to Rome. The term of settlement were loosened, but Greece remained a Roman protectorate with no independent policy of its own. It is a measure of Rome's innermost power that while annexing Macedon, defeating Antiochus and reordering the affairs of Greece, the Republic abandoned none of its ambition in the West. In between 201 BC and 183 BC, the Romans annexed Liguria, the area around modern Genoa, and settled their old score with the Gauls. The Gallic tribes south of the Po were defeated, and many fled beyond the Alps to be replaced by Italian colonists. At the same time, the Romans embarked upon a bitter struggle for the Iberian Peninsula. After Carthage surrendered, Romans seized its Spanish colonies and extracted a fortune in tribute that came ultimately from mines in the interior. In 197 BC, the Celtiberian tribes rebelled, and Cato was sent to suppress them. Cato believed that war support itself. He insisted that his troops live off the country, and though modestly successful in military terms, his campaign of atrocity and confiscation ensured that no war would continue. The Celtiberian resorted to guerrilla warfare, and other communities had involved. And it was not until 133 BC that Numancia, the last center of Spanish resistance, fell to the Romans after a lengthy siege. Scipio Aemilianus, the Roman commander and adopted grandson of Africanus, ordered it burned to the ground without waiting to consult the Senate. The siege of Numancia had been conducted with unparalleled savagery. Whole tribes had been massacred even when they surrendered to the Romans on term. Even Spain. Spain is now a Roman territory. Meanwhile, Carthage had been observing the terms of the peace treaty, because its military power and much of its wealth were gone. But faction headed by Cato wanted nothing but destruction of its old rival. Cato had ended every speech in Senate, regardless of the subject, by saying, "Ceterum censeo delendam esse Cartagenem," in which, in English, "Moreover, I think Carthage must be destroyed." Moreover, in the Battle of Zama, the ambitious Masinasa, king of Numidia, built a powerful north state at Carthage's expense. The Battle of Zama marked the end of the Second Punic War. A Roman army led by Publius Cornelius Scipio, with crucial support from Numidian leader Massinassa, defeated the Carthaginian army led by Hannibal. When Carthaginians tried to stop Massinassa, the Roman allies tried to stop him. His Roman allies saw their action as a breach of treaty. The Romans demanded ever greater concessions, ending with the demand for the destruction of the city and the removal of its population. But the Carthaginians, who had been deprived of most of their weapons, refused. However, after a long and bitter siege in 146 BC, Carthage was destroyed as promised, and a furrow plowed through it that was that sown to salt to indicate that the land would never be occupied again. And by 133 BC, Rome had acquired 7 overseas provinces, namely the Africa, Spain, Macedon, Sicily, Corsica, Sardinia, and the Pergamum. To sum up, the Romans really did not intend to create a world empire, and at first was not ready to rule it. Their political system was sophisticated, and such were city-states. Their financial structure remains primitive. The Senate would expand their ally status to the newly conquered territory. At first, they are hesitant to organize them into state or to keep them for defense. Including the senators, they feared that the creation of new magistrates and consuls general would dilute their own membership and weaken the power of individuals. State charters were very different. States are taxed at different rates, and some paid no taxes at all. In fact, overtaxation caused widespread poverty. But still, the collection was mostly inefficient, whatever the rate. Private contractors take cash or agricultural raw materials and retain a portion of income from taxpayers. As such, it is a system that has created corruption and led to endless complaints. Bribery and extortion can make judges unimaginably wealthy. The imperial bureaucracy did not provide effective oversight, and the temptation was great for money. In short, they weren't as efficient or capable enough. Somehow, it can even be brutal and extortion, but for most people under Roman rule, it probably couldn't have been worse. The Romans didn't start like Alexander, for conquering a new world. From the beginning, they understood that safety depends upon controlling your neighbor's activity gradually. As Polybius put it, fear of the enemy gave way bigger ambitions. Although there may be hard evidence, only from the transcript of the Senate debate, the Roman elite seems to set goals upon creating order for their empire. Truly, that the Second Punic War was the turning point. After that narrow brush with catastrophe, a combination of greed and impatience led the Romans onward. But if the Senate was willing to shoulder new massive responsibilities, it refused to follow that willingness to its logical conclusion. Many years would pass before Rome learned to govern its new possessions effectively, and in the meantime, Rome had itself changed almost beyond recognition. That's all. Thank you for listening.